This is Mrs. Wainwright's Math Class, Chapters 6, 7, and 8, Packet F, Lesson 3. Multiply fractions and mixed numbers by whole numbers. Today's learning target: by the end of the lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can multiply fractions and mixed numbers by whole numbers. Some notes to review again. You can multiply fractions. The denominators do not need to be common. You cannot multiply mixed numbers. And today is you cannot multiply fractions by whole numbers. You cannot do it. What are we going to need to do then? Let's take a look at example number 1 to find out. Mrs. C had 6 apples. She shared 2/3 of her apples with hungry students. How many apples did Mrs. C share? Well, what's the question asking us? How many apples did Mrs. C share? Let's go see what we know. We know that Mrs. C had 6 apples, and we know that she shared 2/3 of her apples. Okay, I see 2/3 of, and anytime I see of after a decimal or a fraction, I know that that means times or multiply. So she shared 2/3 of her 6 apples, so that's going to mean 2/3 times 6, because again, of after a fraction or a decimal means multiply. I'm going to move this to the next page to solve the problem. So I have 2/3 times 6. But I know I just read that I cannot multiply a fraction by a whole number. So what am I going to do? Well, let's take a look at that whole number. If I wanted to turn 6 into a fraction, wouldn't that be the same thing as 6 over 1? Because anything over 1 equals itself. Wow, so that was a real easy fix for my whole number, right? Simply turn it into a fraction and make it over 1. Now I have fraction times fraction, and I can go ahead and multiply. Remember, when I'm multiplying fractions, I follow the X11 strategy. So the first part of my X are my partners of 2 and 1. Oh, but when there's a 1, I'm done. So that's fully simplified. My next part of the X is 6 and 3. There aren't any 1s, so I will need to find the GCF of both 6 and 3. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. Factors of 3 are 1 and 3. The greatest common factor is 3, so I'm going to divide both the 6 divided by 3 and the 3 divided by 3. 6 divided by 3 equals 2, 3 divided by 3 equals 1. Now I'm going to do the 11, the left side, 2 and 1. Oh, there's a 1, I'm done. Now I work on the right side of the 11, the 2 and the 1, and again, oh, there's a 1, I'm done. So I have fully simplified or cross-canceled with my X11 strategy. Let's write down my new fractions. So on the left side I have 2 over 1. This is a multiplication problem. On the right side I have 2 over 1. So we're going to numerator times numerator, 2 times 2 equals 4. Denominator times denominator, 1 times 1 equals 1. Oh, 4 over 1, anything over 1 equals itself. So 4 over 1 equals 4. This was a word problem, so let's go back and put that into my final question answer with a unit. The question asks, how many apples did Mrs. C share? So Mrs. C shared 4, and apples is my unit. It's right there in my question, how many apples? So Mrs. C shared 4 apples. And that's my final answer. 2/3 of 6 equals 4. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Example number 2 says Allie baked chocolate chip cookies. She's planning to give 1 3/4 cookies to each of her 7 friends. How many chocolate chip cookies will Allie be giving away? Well, the question says, how many chocolate chip cookies will Allie be giving away? What do I know? I know that she's going to give 1 3/4 cookies to each of her 7 friends. Remember, when you see each, it's either going to be a multiplication problem or a division problem. So let me think about this. Allie is going to give 1 3/4 cookies to each of her 7 friends. She's going to give 1 3/4 to one friend, 1 3/4 to the second friend, 1 3/4 to the third friend, over and over and over again 7 times. And anytime I have the same number that I'm adding over and over and over again, I know that that's going to be a multiplication problem. So I'm going to multiply 1 3/4 times 7. Let's move this to the next page to solve. So 1 3/4 times 7. I can't multiply by a mixed number, and I can't multiply by a whole number. So what am I going to do? Let's tackle my mixed number first. Oh, when I say a mixed number, I need to change that into an improper fraction. So I'll do my C for changes. My math changes, I learned how to add before I learned how to multiply. Go ahead and follow the arrow. 4 times 1 equals 4. Add my numerator. 4 plus 3 equals 7. Denominator stays the same. So 1 3/4 has changed into 7/4. Now I'll take my multiplication sign and rewrite it down. My whole number is 7. Well, how do I turn a whole number into a fraction? Simple, by putting it over 1. So I'm multiplying that by 7/1. I have fraction by fraction, I'm ready to multiply. Remember, I multiply fractions using the x11 strategy to cross cancel. First part of my x will be the left side 7 and 1. Oh, there's a 1, I'm done. Next part of my x will be 7 and 4. So let's find the GCF of both 7 and 4. I'm going to start with the 4 first because it's smaller. When I go through my 4 times tables, I say 1 and 4, 2 and 2, and I'm done. When I go through my 7 times tables, I say 1 and 7, and that's it. 4 doesn't work, 2 doesn't work, 1 works. Oh, and when the GCF is 1, my fraction is done. So now I move to the left side of the 11, which is 7 and 4. And notice this, I already have the 4, and I already have the 7, and I found that the GCF is 1. So again, GCF is 1 means that first part of my 11 is done. The right side of the 11, I have 7 and 1. Again, the 1 means I'm done. So there's no cross-canceling that needs to be done in this problem. Okay, so we're ready to multiply. Numerator times numerator, 7 times 7 equals 49. Denominator times denominator, 4 times 1 equals 4. We have to do the last check and say, is this a proper fraction? Will it work in a chicken fight? No way. Boom. That's going to drop right down into the division box pool. Remember to cross that out on top. We're ready to go ahead and divide. This will be a 2-digit answer. 4 goes into 4 one time. 1 times 4 equals 4. Subtract 4 minus 4 equals 0. Compare 0 is less than 4. Bring down the 9. Go back and divide. 4 goes into 9 2 times. Multiply. 2 times 4 equals 8. Subtract 9 minus 8 equals 1. And 1 is less than 4. There's nothing to bring down, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my remainder into a fraction. Remainder becomes the numerator. Divisor becomes the denominator. And if I already properly cross-canceled, then this fraction will be fully simplified. So my final answer will be the mixed number of 12 and 1/4. But remember, this is a word problem, so let's go back and put that into a final answer with the unit. And the question said, how many chocolate chip cookies will Allie be giving away? So my answer will be, Allie will be giving away 12 and 1/4. What's the unit? Well, my question tells me, it says how many chocolate chip cookies. So Allie will be giving away 12 and 1/4 chocolate chip cookies. And that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 2 right now. And let's take a look at our final example, example number 3. Susie went to 5 Ranger games. Anthony said he went to 2 2/5 times as many games. How many Ranger games did Anthony go to? What's the question asking? How many Ranger games did Anthony go to? Let's see what I know. I know that Susie went to 5 Ranger games. And I know that Anthony said he went to 2 2/5 times as many games. Oh, anytime I see a problem where something has a certain amount of times more than something else, that's usually draw a diagram. But remember, I'm not going to draw a diagram with fractional parts. So when I have fractions, that makes it a little bit different. But let's think about this. Times means multiplication. So this is going to be a multiplication problem. So I'm going to say 5 times 2 2/5. If Anthony went to 2 2/5 times as many games as Susie, I'm going to multiply 2 2/5 times the amount of games Susie went to. Let's move to the next page to solve this problem. Let's take a look at my first number, which is a whole number, 5. Oh, I can't multiply with whole numbers and fractions. So what am I going to need to do to the 5? Turn it into a fraction. And how do I turn a whole number into a fraction? By putting it over 1. My next factor is a mixed number, and I know I can't multiply by mixed numbers, so what am I going to do? I'm going to have to change this mixed number into an improper fraction. So C for changes, math changes. First I learned how to add before I learned how to multiply. Follow my arrow. 5 times 2 equals 10. Add the numerator. 10 plus 2 equals 12. Denominator stays the same. So I changed 2 and 2/5 into 12/5. Let's rewrite my fractions. I have 5 over 1 times 12/5. Okay, anytime I'm going to multiply fractions, I need to use the X11 strategy. So let's do the first part of the X, which is the 5 and the 5. Let's find my GCF of 5 and 5. Well, the factors of 5 are 1 and 5, and that's it. The factors of 5 again are 1 and 5, and that's it. Is 5 a factor of 5? Yes, it is, so the GCF is 5. Therefore, I'm going to need to divide both of these by 5. Let's go ahead and solve. 5 divided by 5 equals 1. 5 divided by 5 equals 1. The next part of my X is the 12 and the 1, but when there's a 1, I'm done. Now I'm going to go to the 11. The first part is on the left side, 1 and 1. When there's a 1, I'm done. On the right side, 12 and 1. When there's a 1, I am done. So I followed my cross-canceling of X11. Let's rewrite my final new fractions. I have 1 over 1 times 12 over 1. I've fully simplified or cross-canceled, so I'm ready to multiply. Numerator times numerator, 12 times 1 equals 12. Denominator times denominator, 1 times 1 equals 1. Hey, anything over 1 equals itself. So 12 over 1 equals 12. And this was a word problem, so let's go back and put that with our question and the unit. So the question said, how many Ranger games did Anthony go to? So therefore my answer will be, Anthony went to 12. What's my unit? Ranger games. And that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 3 right now. So let's review. You can multiply fractions. The denominators do not need to be common to multiply them. But you cannot multiply mixed numbers, so if you have a mixed number, you need to change it into an improper fraction. And you cannot multiply fractions by whole numbers, so if you have a whole number, you need to change it to a fraction by putting it over 1. Once you change your mixed numbers into improper fractions and take your whole numbers and put them over 1, then you can go ahead and follow the X11 strategy to cross-cancel. When you're finished, you do your multiplication, numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, and your final check is see if it's a proper fraction. If it's not a proper fraction, if it's improper, you must drop it down into the division box pool and divide to get your total final answer. Hopefully by now you can confidently say, I can multiply fractions and mixed numbers by whole numbers. We will be practicing more in class, and again, if you have any questions or need help, please see a teacher. We will sit down and work with you. Good luck with the lesson.